Dvorak taking on Stefan Erceg. I'm gonna go with Stefan, and the reason I'm having a hard time judging whether or not I should do that is because lately when I picked the new guy against the UFC vet with a 50-50 record, the UFC vet has been pulling it out. But I don't know. I just think David Dvorak is really bottom of the barrel flyweight outside of the rankings, and I feel I can trust a young player. On Steve Erceg taking on Alessandro Costa. Feel bad for Erceg. He was supposed to be getting his fight further up the rankings with Matt Schnell, but Matt Schnell pulls out due to injury. Steve Erceg came into the UFC earlier this year and won a fight against somebody in the rankings as his first fight, which was really fucking good for his career overall. It put him right into the top 15, first fight in the UFC. Like, you just don't see that too often. And the only weight class that you really can see something like that is flyweight, because there's really just not that much depth outside of the top 15. We're starting to add more to it, but there's not too much. I'm going to trust Steve Erceg because on the feet he's just a little bit better, but this is a dangerous fight for him. Alessandro Costa can catch him with some crazy shit, spinning shit, throwing power punches, just a whole lot of shit like that. So you got to look out for that if you're Steve Erceg, but he's a smart guy, so I'm going to trust him by decision. Now taking on Steve Erceg. I have to side with Steve Erceg. 2-0 in the UFC already. His first fight was a top 15 ranking. I have not seen that happen in a long time. I think he's also just technically too good. He always comes in with a clear-cut game plan. His striking is crisp, his grappling's crisp, he has heart, he's tough as shit. He has everything that you'd want to see in an up-and-coming prospect, and he has a pretty clean record, 11-1. Matt Schnell, although I really do like him, and he shot up as one of my top fighters to watch out for at flyweight. After that comeback that he had against Sumadarji, I thought that was awesome. I think it was Sumadarji. Let me just double check here, because sometimes I'll be checking me in the comments, and it's a good thing. Yeah, it was Sumadarji. Okay, yeah. Great fight. Hell of a fight. If you guys haven't seen it, please go watch Matt Schnell versus Sumadarji. He was getting obliterated. It was some Frankie Edgar shit. He was getting dropped around all over the place, getting rocked with every hit, and he still comes back and latches up a triangle. It was beautiful. He has a lot of heart, but he's too chinny. He's taking too much damage. He's too weathered in his career. I mean, he could get it done and have another, big story and perhaps have another run. This is where it would start. I don't think it's going to, though. I think Steve Erceg is going to clear it 3-0, keep his perfect streak in the octagon, and we're going to see a lot more of this guy. So stay on the lookout for Steve Erceg. He's putting on for Australia. What's poppin', y'all? Welcome back to the channel. UFC 301 takes place this weekend. We're back to the pay-per-view cards, and I'm going to be breaking down the entire card, start to finish, starting with the early prelims. Like I said, this is a pay-per-view card, so we've got early prelims, and a headliner. Early prelims are going to be starting at 3 p.m. here on the West Coast. First fight of the night, Alessandro Costa taking on Kevin Borjas. I'm going to be taking Alessandro Costa purely because he's, I feel, more athletic and a little bit more battle-tested in the UFC. Kevin Borjas, he has a cool kickboxing style, but I feel like he's just a little bit too frail. He's going to get caught bad by Alessandro Costa, and I can see him getting put out relatively early. Like, when I say relatively early, I mean within 6.5, 7 minutes of the fight. I do feel like it could go to the second round. Honestly, it could even go to a decision if we're being realistic, just because they're flyweights. But Alessandro Costa throws dangerous shots on the feet. He has wild hooks that I feel like are going to catch Borjas as he's trying to pull out of the pocket with his chin up in the air like he likes to do a lot. If he comes out there and just blasts him immediately, he could find a knee into a straight shot or something along those lines. But I feel like the odds are a lot more slim for Kevin Borjas. I'd side with Alessandro Costa getting this one done within the distance. Moving on up the card at lightweight, we've got Ismael Bonfim taking on Vinc Pichel. Vinc Pichel is 41 years old. And Ismael Bonfim, although he did have a setback against, Benoit Saint Denis, BSD turned out to be, a pretty solid fighter in his own right. Although I do think Ismael Bonfim isn't going to be the level of talent that we thought the Bonfim brothers were going to be. I do think he's going to smoke somebody like Vinc Pichel, probably in the first round. I think this is another safe bet to prop, ending within the distance. If you really want to be risky, I'd prop it in the first round, a knockout, or a finish, honestly, because he could find a submission as well. But I feel like he's going to find, you know, a hook and a knee up the middle, something along those lines. Really quickly, he's going to press him up against the cage with pressure, or Vinc Pichel is going to try to press a takedown. He's going to get reversed. And then eventually, you know, Ismael Bonfim's just going to start teeing off on him. He's too old. He does have decent wins in his career, and he has a good grinder type of style, but age just plays such a factor, especially at lightweight. 41 years old is unacceptable. I'm sorry. Moving on up the card, Dione Barbosa taking on Ernesta Kareckaite. This is a difficult one to call. We've got a typical grappler versus striker matchup. The Brazilian and Dione Barbosa is the grappler. Ernesta Kareckaite, 5-0, is the striker, and she's young. She's pretty talented, but I feel like Dione Barbosa, you know, fighting on a card, a pay-per-view card in Brazil, is going to be able to find her takedowns, find her ground control. I don't know if she'll be able to chase a submission and get it, but I'm sure she will go for a couple of them. She has a decently aggressive ground game. As long as she can find her takedowns, this fight should be secured. I don't think Ernesta's going to be able to get back up more than once or twice, if she can at all. But if it's on the feet, I do think this is going to look pretty rough for anyone that bets for Dione Barbosa. So pick and choose how you bet on this card. I might stay away from this one, but if you really do want to prop it, go with Dione Barbosa by a decision. I feel like that's a pretty safe bet. Or if you really trust the striker, do the opposite. But I do think it will be a decision regardless. Moving on up the card, Mauricio Ruffy taking on Jamie Mullarkey. This is rough because I really like Jamie Mullarkey, and I feel like he's had kind of a rough go as of late. He used to be somewhat of a prospect in his own right, but now he's just been shown to be too chinny and a little bit too slow. I feel like he's extremely weathered in his career as well. He's been through a lot of wars and just like a lot of tough fights. Even the wins that he has, sometimes they end up being really gritty. And Mauricio Ruffy had an amazing performance in the Contender Series. He has a Conor-esque striking style, if you will, you know. I don't know how else to describe it. Just go watch his fights. You'll see what I'm talking about. And he lands with power. He's really confident at 9-1. Another Brazilian. I just feel like they get a map bonus in Brazil. I'm going to trust Mauricio Ruffy to get this one done against Jamie Mullarkey. I feel like it's pretty safe to say that he's going to knock him out. It's just the way that the styles clash. I feel like Mauricio Ruffy is going to find the shots pretty quickly, and there's going to be a speed advantage for him and a power advantage and a chin advantage. So even if it ends up being a war and they trade shots, I feel like the younger fighter in Ruffy is going to be able to just withstand the damage. So I'm going to trust Mauricio Ruffy getting this one done by a knockout. It really sucks for Jamie Mullarkey, man. Oh, shit. Moving on, up the card. Joaquim Silva taking on Drakkar Klose. This is one where I don't think a Brazilian is going to be getting it done. I think Drakkar Klose has the style to make this a gritty fight. Now, Joaquim Silva is freakishly built, and he's explosive. He has multiple ways to finish the fight. But I feel like if Drakkar can survive like maybe the first 3 minutes of an explosive Joaquim Silva, he ends up winning the fight everywhere. He has better ground control. He has just a weird style on the feet. Or I feel like he can even end up dropping Joaquim with like a straight while Joaquim's trying to exit the pocket, just right down the pipe, catching him full extension. He's good at, like I said, just making it a scrappy fight, making it a dog fight. And if you're not good at fighting that style, which I don't think Joaquim really can for as long as Drakkar Klose, then you're going to get drowned out. I'm going to trust Drakkar Klose to get this one done. He has a sneaky good record. Really close wins, honestly, if you pick at his record with a fine comb. But 14-2, it's not bad. I'm going to trust him to come out here, get this one done. He's probably going to be sitting at a close favorite, I would imagine. Let's trust Drakkar Klose getting this one done. Let's call it by a unanimous decision. Now we move on up into the prelims, starting with Gene Silva taking on William Gomis. This is a difficult fight to call, in my opinion, just because we don't know enough about Gene Silva. He's only fought Weston Wilson in the UFC, and of course he smoked Weston Wilson, which a lot of us trusted him to do. But like, again, of course you're going to do that. He has a brash personality. I like that. I like how he came on the mic afterwards. But I feel like, once again, the Brazilian is going to be losing in Brazil. I think William Gomis, the Frenchman, he's more battle-tested for one in the UFC. That's just a fact. We've seen more of his game plan and his style. And for 2, he can play that like rangy kickboxer style, and then he can mix it up into some pretty smooth grappling that I feel like Gene Silva just won't be able to handle. So if William Gomis is really on his game, this should be a wash. Now, you never know, and honestly, it's what makes predicting fights so difficult. Gene Silva could come out here and just catch him being really explosive, maybe being faster, but I feel like William Gomis, he's young enough to take the damage if he gets hit early and survive it, and I feel like he's smart enough to work just, you know, a high IQ game plan. I'm going to trust William Gomis to get this one done by a decision, probably a pretty boring fight, but who knows. Moving on up the card, my prospect of the year for 2023, Elves Brenner, taking on Myktybek, Orolbai. Look, this is so difficult for me because I've picked against Elves Brenner against people that you feel like no matter what, he should get it done. And then he should lose. And then he just finds a way to get it done. His first fight, his debut, honestly a robbery. He shouldn't have won that fight, but the judges gave it to him. His second fight against, oh my God, Guram Kuchataladze, war, and he ends up coming out on top by a knockout. His third fight, kind of somebody that was just pulled into the UFC, who had a decent record, but I feel like honestly wasn't that good if you really look at it. Wasn't really tested, but he ends up smoking him, as you should. So he's done pretty well in his career thus far, 3-0 in the UFC. But Myktybek Orolbai just seems like a different level of a prospect, and he's like a couple updates behind, if you know what I mean. Like, he's definitely caveman. Caveman status, caveman type beat, whatever you want to call it. Caveman type shit. Myktybek Orolbai is that, and he has that type of strength too. And honestly, he fights with a pretty solid game plan for somebody that's new to the UFC. 12-1 shows you that he has a really good record. And if you look at the one fight that he lost, arguably he won that fight. I kind of lean towards he did win that fight, if I'm being completely honest with you. So he should be 13-0. Now, Elves Brenner, once again, he's proven himself time and time again, but I feel like this is just a bad style matchup. I think Myktybek Orolbai is going to come out here and really dominate him on the ground. I think Elves Brenner is tough enough to survive and not get finished, so I'm going to trust Myktybek Orolbai getting it done by unanimous decision, maybe even getting a 10-8 in one of those rounds. Moving on up the card, Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Iasmin Lucindo. Tough fight to call because Karolina Kowalkiewicz is honestly on like a revitalization in her career. She's on a 4-fight win streak, which is just crazy considering she was on a 5-fight losing streak, and really just seemed like she was going completely downhill. Like, dude, she lost to Jessica Penne, which is unacceptable. All of her other losses are decent. Jessica Penne, that is crazy to me because Jessica Penne like came back when that happened. But other than that, she's been looking pretty solid. And Iasmin Lucindo, let me just double check on her last couple of fights. Oh yeah, no, she's looking pretty good as well. Brogan Walker win and a win over Polyana Viana. She lost her UFC debut against Yasmin Uruguay, but that's an amazing prospect, so that's not even like a bad win to have. I'm gonna trust Iasmin Lucindo to get this one done by a decision, actually by a submission. I think that she's gonna chase it once it gets to the ground. Eventually this fight will get to the ground. It's probably going to be pretty boring on the feet, really sloppy, but Iasmin is going to land with more power, more ferocity. She's going to take it to the ground, or Karolina is going to take it to the ground, and somehow Iasmin's going to find her way into an armbar. That's how I see this fight going. I feel like Karolina, as well-rounded as she is and kind of tested in the UFC, she has some pretty blatant flaws. That's why she has 7 losses, and she was once undefeated in this promotion. I feel like Iasmin is going to exploit those flaws, chase an aggressive submission, and snap the win streak of Karolina. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's the complete opposite. That's just how these fights go sometimes, especially in the women's division. Moving on up the card, Joe Anderson Brito taking on Jack Shore. This is like a pick'em to me. I'm going to trust Joe Anderson Brito to get this one done in his hometown, especially because in some fights where it's been looking bad for him, like the Jonathan Pierce one where he's getting dominated all fight, he pulls a finish out of nowhere. I love that he has that type of like ferocity and like finishing potential. He really goes for it. You got to appreciate it in any fighter that's like that, especially one that's like outside of the top 15 and, you know, just a prospect outside of the rankings in general. Now, Jack Shore, aside from his one loss to Ricky Simone, he's been pretty much flawless in his UFC career and in his career thus far, 17-1. He has an amazing jab that he can work behind against Brito, and we've seen him have trouble with that before. He has great timing on takedowns, good control. I feel like he can hold down Joe Anderson the same way that Pierce was. Now, the problem is I feel like there's definitely going to be a power difference and a speed difference. If Jack Shore can really just work behind his jab, this might be an easy win for him. And that's why it's a nerve-wracking pick for me. But I am going to trust Joe Anderson Brito to just make it a dogfight, channel the power from the crowd, from being in his hometown. And he's also just like a mean dude. He's just one of those, Peter Yan-esque type of fighters. He wants to make it gritty. He wants to inflict damage. I'm going to pick Joe Anderson Brito, getting this one done by a finish against a tough Jack Shore, who's probably going to survive the initial onslaught, but eventually it's going to be too much. Moving up into, is this the main card now? Yeah, moving up into the main card, Paul Craig taking on Kyle Borralho. I'm going to be taking Kyle Borralho, 15-1. He's just proven to be too good in the UFC with that, kind of lay and pray style, if I'm being honest, but he has good finishing potential. It's just he doesn't really chase him as much for whatever reason. Either way, he's young, he's talented, he's marketable, he knows his position in the UFC and in life right now, and I like that in fighters. I like when they really just understand where they're at. They end up being the more confident fighters, and they end up usually just coming in and getting a lot of wins. Paul Craig is one of these people that can come in to somebody's hometown and find a way to submit you. We've seen him do it time and time again. You can never really count him out, but I think in this style matchup, it's just going to be rough. Kyle Borralho is going to find his takedowns, and I think he's going to posture up and TKO Paul Craig, maybe even knock him out on the ground. I think he's going to land big damage in certain positions. It's probably going to be a war at first on the ground, but I think Kyle Borralho is just going to land better. I'm going to trust Kyle Borralho getting this one done by a second round TKO on the ground. Moving on up the card, Michel Pereira taking on Ihor Potieria. Not much to say about this one. I think Michel Pereira just looks different at middleweight, and either way, he's always looked like an amazing prospect. He just didn't always use his head, and he tried to be too much of a showman. Now he's really fighting like he wants to, eventually go up and be a contender for the belt. I think Ihor Potieria is too chinny, and he's going to get explosively knocked out in the first round. Honestly, it's hard to call. He might survive the first initial damage and then get subbed. Michel Pereira loves to do shit like that. So I would just, if you are going to bet it, I would just prop it by a first round finish. I think that's pretty safe. I'm trusting Michel Pereira to get this one done pretty easily. Moving on up the card, Anthony Smith taking on Vitor Petrino in the feature fight of the card. Anthony Smith is just washed at this point. I'm sorry. There's not much more to say about it. Vitor Petrino already looks like a freak athlete, a freak talent, submission potential, heart, a hell of a chin. He's young, he's fit as hell, knockout power. He's undefeated. I'm trusting Vitor Petrino to get this one done by a second round TKO. I think Anthony Smith is really tough, so regardless, it's going to be hard to just completely flash KO him. But I think Vitor Petrino is going to eat up his leg in the first round, and in the second round, he's going to find a hook that drops Anthony. He's going to shell up, and yeah, he's just going to land on the guard and get a TKO win. Moving on into the co-main event of the night, Jonathan Martinez taking on Jose Aldo. The return of the King of Rio in his hometown. In his own home country. I don't even know if this is in Rio. It might be. Jonathan Martinez has been on a hell of a roll, beating a lot of people that odds makers didn't expect him to beat. And honestly, I didn't in some of them. But he's fighting the King of Rio in a 3-round bout. And I feel like, he's going to make it a close fight and win one of these rounds because he's tough. Maybe the first round against Aldo, who's coming back. But I think Aldo eventually is just going to pick up steam in the second and third. He's going to be finding those body hooks. He's going to be hopefully, let's pray to the MMA gods that Aldo throws his leg kicks again, because if he does that, this fight's a wash. I feel like he really does start to take over and steamroll Jonathan Martinez. But overall, I just think he's way too good of a kickboxer, and he's far more tested. He has the better style matchup as well. If this was a completely prime Aldo, even though they fought in different eras, we would also be taking Aldo because we just know the style matchup is bad for Jonathan Martinez. Now, he can make it a gritty fight, and if he mixes up his grappling and makes it boring with cage control, he could win this fight really, really easily, I feel like. But I don't know if he can do that against Jose Aldo in Jose Aldo's hometown. And he's coming back, and he wants to make a splash and, go into boxing. I'm hoping this doesn't play against me, and Jose's just coming in here to finish his contract so he can go box. I hope that's not the case. I'd like to think that Jose really wants to win in his hometown, especially if this ends up being his last fight. So I'm picking Jose Aldo, 2-1. Maybe you could probably buy a split decision. I could see there being some drama in the co-main, but I'm picking Jose Aldo. And then we have the main event of the night, You saw the beginning of this video, so you know I'm basically the #1 Steve Erceg fan at this point. Steve Erceg taking on Alexandre Pantoja for the flyweight title. The #10 ranked flyweight Steve Erceg with only 3 fights in the UFC. He debuts against a ranked contender on short notice, gets it done. Then he comes in against against Alessandro Costa, the one opening the card tonight, on Saturday. And he gets that one done against a tough, explosive contender. And then he takes on Matt Schnell, and he smokes him with a knockout in the second round. And now he's here fighting for the flyweight title. He debuted after Bilal Muhammad's last fight, and he's getting a title shot before Bilal Muhammad does. Like, this is just absolute craziness, but I think it's deserved. And like I said, I'm the #1 Steve Erceg fan. He just has aura about him, bro. Like, he's repping for teachers and librarians and male nurses all around the world. Alexandre Pantoja is tough as hell. He can make it a dogfight. He has cardio for days, even when it seems like he's gassed out. He has some of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the sport. And he has decent knockout power. Now, his flaws, he'll just kind of enter the pocket and wing these wild hooks with his chin up to close distance that I feel like is not going to fly against somebody that's so technical like Steve Erceg and really young. I feel like Steve Erceg is going to get this one done by a split decision. I think that at first he's just going to kind of have trouble with Alexandre Pantoja's takedown timing and his ground control and his grappling pace. But eventually he's going to just find clean shots, straights, and hooks. And he's going to outbox Alexandre Pantoja. The last 3 rounds of the fight, I think he's going to start to smoke him. I could even see Steve Erceg knocking Alexandre Pantoja out. But I feel like he's a little bit too tough, and he's just proven too many times in his career that he has one hell of a chin and he's a dog. So I'm going to trust Steve Erceg to get this one done. I think it's going to be a split decision, like I said, and I think we're going to have a new champion. Let's fucking go, baby. I hope this one pays out because, like I said, I'm the #1 Steve Erceg fan, and he's not done me wrong at all so far in my UFC prediction career. So shout out Steve Erceg for getting this title shot. Honestly, I know why a lot of people are complaining about UFC 301, but at the same time, I don't, because I feel like it's a pretty good card. Let me know what you guys think down below. That's going to be the end of my rant. I'm done yapping. I'll catch y'all.